Happy Monday. The following is the heartfelt story of a family turned apart and destroyed during the Holocaust, and the technological miracle that brings the survivors together after 51 years of thinking each other dead. I hope you enjoy the story. During the Nazi occupation of Europe during World War II, millions of Jews were sent to concentration camps as part of Hitler's final solution. Among them, a family of 7, the Hollanders from Czechoslovakia. It was March of 1944 when the family arrived at the most notorious of death camps, Auschwitz. Upon arrival, the family was separated. Mother and sisters went to the left, father and sons to the right. Ernest and Alex Hollander would never see his mother and sisters again. 3 days after, the Nazis transported the brothers to a slave labor camp. The Nazis were building a railway station, so they had to carry 50-pound bags of cement 14 hours a day, practically on no food. The Jews in the mornings were given a cup of black coffee, but there wasn't even coffee. It was just something that looked black and tasted hot, with no food for the rest of the day until evening. They would be given a quarter pound of bread and a bowl of potato peel soup. German doctors figured out that prisoners could survive on 600 calories a day for 3 to 6 months. And if they died after, they didn't care because they had enough surplus workers to replace them. It was in the following weeks that the brothers learned what had happened to their mother and sisters. They had been told to head straight into the showers, but it was gas. And according to the testimony of the Hollander family, the Nazis used the cheapest gas possible. It was so cheap that it didn't even kill people. Many of them were still alive on their way to the crematoriums. The one thing keeping the remainder of the Hollander family fighting to stay alive was the knowledge that their 2 older brothers had escaped the ghetto before the Nazis arrived. Perhaps one day they could be reunited. On April of 1945, tragedy struck once again. The father cut 3 of his fingers with an electrical power, and in the concentration camps, if you can't work, you can't stay alive. So the father was thrown into a cell without medical attention or food to die. The 2 brothers were now on their own, and somehow they managed to survive another 11 months of pain and suffering. They said that what kept them alive was that they worked together. They would encourage each other to hold on just one more day and one more hour. Fortunately, Alex and Ernest were 15 years old, so they were able to endure a lot more than other people who were in their 50s and 60s. On April of 1945, as Allied forces began liberating the camps, Ernest and Alex were moved to an unknown location and were ordered to march. It was called the Death March, on the way to an extermination camp. The brothers were finally liberated, but the happy reunion they had hoped for was not meant to be. Ernest and Alex were told that both his brothers had died. His older brother Sultan's body was last seen being cut from a tree after German soldiers hanged him to die at the end of the war. So with little keeping them in Europe, they decided to migrate to the United States. It would take nearly 50 years and a miracle for what's about to happen. Having lived through the horrors of the concentration camps, Ernest dedicated his life to keeping the memory of what happened alive. It was a decision that would be the start of a miracle. By 1992, Ernest had spoken to 270 schools a year, educating the future generations of the horrors of the Holocaust. In April of 1992, the Montel Williams Show hosted a segment on the debate of the Holocaust, and Ernest was invited to be a panelist. As fate would have it, there was a man who happened to be watching the show and recognized something that no one else could see. As he watched, he recognized one of the guests. The man speaking looked exactly like a man he knew in Serbia, and even stranger, they had the same last name. Sitka immediately contacted his former neighbor in Serbia and learned that in fact he had a brother named Ernest, who he believed had died for 50 years. Sitka immediately contacted the Montel Williams show to get Ernest's phone number, but they did not believe his story. Sitka persisted, and finally, after several letters and phone calls, he was in touch with Ernest's wife, Anna. When Ernest learned of the news, he was skeptical. In fact, Ernest had made a memorial plaque for his brother. After speaking with Sitka and hearing that his brother was alive and living in Serbia, and hearing all the family information that Sitka had acquired from his brother, he finally believed him. Sitka gave Ernest his brother's number. Imagine the shock, the joy, and the tears of two brothers who thought of each other dead for 50 years. Ernest learned that his brother Sultan had indeed been strung to die in 1944, but he fell between the trees and played dead until he could escape. Sultan also believed his entire family had perished in the war, having no idea that he had two brothers living in California. Sitka contacted the Montel Williams show, and they agreed to have the brothers reunite on national television. In October of 1992, after being separated for nearly 50 years, Ernest, Alex, and Sultan Hollander finally held each other. This is an amazing story because there's so many miracles that had to take place. For one, the two brothers surviving the concentration camp. The other brother, who was supposed to be hung to death, happened to fall upon trees and got saved. A man who was supposed to be at work, who had to cancel because his babysitter couldn't come, happens to turn the TV on at the precise moment when the Montel Williams show was on. Isn't that amazing? And for this man who, in perfect timing, happened to watch it, and not only watch it, but to act on it, I think that this is proof that miracles can happen. And given that today is Monday, the first day of the week, let that be your theme. Remember this story, that there is always hope. Even in the darkest moments of humanity, there can always be light. And since you're watching this video, please subscribe so you never miss the opportunity to watch an episode and get inspired by these beautiful stories. And I will see you next week. In the meantime, stay safe, stay grateful, and never lose hope, because a miracle could also happen to you when you least expect it. I'll see you next week.